Welcome to my garage. Today we're going to go through the start of probably a multiple day process of me rewrapping my 2023 BMW S1000RR. This was the second time that I've wrapped it, and it specifically is in an Avery Dennison substrate, so generally that's pretty easy to work with. I was pretty happy with the application, other than obviously there's some wrinkling here where the adhesion wasn't ideal. So I'm hoping that I can take this from what I would say is 95% satisfactory to a perfect wrap job. I'm going to go through the process of taking off the panels that we're going to wrap, and then also the actual wrap process itself. I'm not an expert, so this is kind of just going to be ideally what the average person can do in their own garage. So our tail section, you have to take the key and pop off the passenger seat, and then it's actually held on by just a single T20 Torx screw. So we'll take that out. And then it has some plastic clips that hold the sides on here, and it really pops off pretty easily. I would say this is the easiest one to remove on the entire bike. I actually may have lied, because these side mid panels, they just pop off without any actual disassembly. So there's a few plastic clips in there, and then the whole thing just pops right out. And then our top panel here that covers the ECU is held on by three. These are T25 Torx. I mean, it's pretty obvious how to take apart this bike. I would say that BMW really did do a good job of putting this in a way that you can take it apart without too much difficulty. Really the opposite of what I generally would expect from it being a German manufactured product. And it's held on by a few clips, and the whole thing just comes right off like so. So on the front panels specifically, I'm gonna just talk through it, and then I can do a time lapse of me doing it. But what's gonna need to happen is you don't need to take off the full windscreen. You just need to take off the top screw, and then you have to take the mirrors off, which they're held on by nuts on the back side. And then there is one small Torx under here, which generally, in order to get to this, I would say that the best method that I've always used is to take off the middle chin spoiler, which is also held on by two T20 Torx nut bolts right on the back side of here. So I'll go ahead and take that off for you all. And then these are just held on by clips, so you can kind of pop it and it comes right off. No need to take off the center stay or any of the additional parts. And I did lie, the windscreen does have to come off because I'll have to take off the clips for the mirrors. And then once that's off, I can pop these two panels out. And then there's also one Torx screw that's headed under the back of the seat to take this off. We need to take this off because we will have to wrap around the bottom of the tank so that you don't see the seam. And then also we will have to take off the side fairings here that are covering up the side of the tank so that we can pull the wrap down under. And then this time, I didn't wrap it the last time that I did this activity, but I'm going to wrap the lower fairings as well as the front fender. I have taken this off, I haven't taken this off, so it seems like there's just 4 screws here to take off, and then there's 7 here as well. Important thing to make note is to just keep track of which ones go where, as there are a few of these that have a bit of a shoulder compared to the others. So now that we have the whole bike disassembled and we have all of the fairings on the ground, this is probably one of my least favorite parts of the process, and we just get to take all of the old vinyl off, which is tedious and annoying. And I also lied, because you indeed do have to take off the gas cap to get the wrap off of the tank. So there are 5 Torx screws in here, and then the whole insert just comes right out. So, we are going to start the actual wrapping process. And, this is an Oracal 970RA substrate that I cut to roughly fit the size of this panel. I don't really use these huge oversized panels like some people do, but But then again, this is a very simple shape to wrap, so that's kind of why I'm starting with this, to get a feel for the material itself. Before you wanna do anything to it though, I'm gonna spray it with, you can use like isopropyl alcohol, or this is a CarPro eraser, which is kind of just like a surface treatment so that you can take off any of the oils if there were anything on it. Of course, these panels have been wrapped for the life of the bike, so paint-wise, they're pretty perfect. There's no scratches, but of course, if you have any dents, dings, divots, or whatnot, that will show through on the wrap. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to tape off the backing here. Then I'll take my panel, and usually when I look at it, I kind of look at the shape and try to set it down in the rough shape of like the flattest point across. You'll learn that a lot of what goes into wrapping, I would say, is a little bit of how do I direction and stretch my film. So I'm going to start about here, and then I'm going to roll, or not, I'm going to roll it so that we get some contact of the part on the film itself. And I want to make sure, of course, that I'm placing it to where the whole thing fits on the sheet. Okay, so now the fun part starts. So it's kind of stuck by a few points, and this is where we kind of look at it, and I've got a squeegee here, of course. With these smaller parts, a lot of what I'm doing is going to be with my hands. So really, you're just trying to smooth across the different surfaces of the vinyl, and then get to the edges. And I always like to try and work out the creases as I go. And like if you have a good film, you see how I have this bubble here? They have a release kind of on the back side so that you really can just squeeze it right out, and there it's like it never happened. So now that for the most part we have finished pushing the vinyl down onto the shape itself, the next part is kind of tedious, and it's where we will go around and trim off the excess vinyl and wrap around the edges. And I would say that generally this probably is the part that takes the longest and is probably my least favorite. So I'm just going to cut around, and then I'll start folding. And as I fold around, I've noticed that with this product, doesn't really like to stick around the edges unless I'm using heat as well. So I'll use that, and then we'll do a post heat of the part, and that's kind of the basics of wrapping itself. So now that we have this panel wrapped here, of course, I don't really fixate too much on what the backside looks like, and this panel specifically slots into another panel in the mid of the bike, so the edges look pretty decent, but of course they're not perfect. So the next thing that's really important to do is you have to post heat the film so that it kind of eliminates the memory of it being a flat sheet, and it will stick to this shape, and you won't have anything bubbling up later, say if it got in the sun or something like that. another tip I wanted to share on some of these pieces that are a little bit more complex. You can see on this, the tail, we have kind of like a ridge on both sides where the vinyl is really going to be stretching to meet that, and then also inside, which isn't as important because there's a seat over it, but there's a product, it's called tape primer, and it's made by 3M, and I've had a lot of luck with using it in these areas just to give the vinyl a little bit more to stick onto. So really all you have to do here is just paint it into your areas that you expect there to be a little bit more adhesion required. Let it dry, and then usually you shouldn't have as much of a problem. So, I just worked the material down that crease I was telling you about, and look at how nice that looks. I'm pretty satisfied with that. So as long as that stays down after we post heat it, we should be all set. And just look at that vinyl, isn't it pretty amazing? So now I'm going to wrap one of the lower fairings, which it is it's not just black plastic, it has a paint to it, but what I did here was I applied some of the edge promoter in some of the areas where I predict there could be issues with adhesion, so I put it right on this crease here, as well as some of the indents inside these wells, which I'm probably going to end up cutting just below the surface because it is navy vinyl and this is black, so it's hard to tell. And then I have it in these corners and then just around this last crease as well. So I've never wrapped this piece before, so it's going to be a completely new process for me, and hopefully it turns out, because this is a pretty big piece of vinyl if it doesn't. Okay, so this is going to be the last part of the wrap process, which is the fuel tank, and I would say this is probably one of, in my opinion, the more difficult parts to wrap, just because you have a lot of curvature here. And then I had issues with the last time where there's a little bit of a crease down here and the vinyl kept wanting to kind of peel up and bubble. So I'm hoping that through applying some of that edge primer from the start along the top edge and then around this crease, that I'll be able to get the actual wrapped surface itself to stick and then not bubble up. So I'll also be hitting it with some heat afterwards. And I would say that the best method that I've found of doing this in one piece is to kind of stick it right in the middle here, and then as you're pulling, kind of pull forwards and outwards, so then you don't end up with too much material back here at the tail end of the tank. So this probably will be about a 2-hour process to get this all wrapped up, so hopefully we get a good time lapse.